So how long does it take from tracking your time to getting the bill out the door, right? No call, we built what I think is a very great solution, but if you don't bill for it, we can't chase it for you, right? And if they, similar, if you don't bill for it, Confido can't transact a payment for you, right? You haven't asked, right? And until you ask for the money, no one's giving you any money. So it's critical, right?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Financially Legal today. My name is Emery Wager. I'm your host, co-founder of Confido Legal, an integrated payment system specifically designed for the legal space. And today I'm incredibly excited to welcome Matt Darner to the podcast. Matt is the founder of Collbox, which helps businesses, in particular law firms, improve their overall collection rate and speed up the time it takes to get paid. He's and his company have helped businesses collect hundreds of thousands of invoices, worth tens of millions of dollars. And so he thinks a lot about how to really optimize collections, particularly for kind of invoice-based businesses, and particularly for law firms. So super excited to get some of his tips. Obviously, that is a collection rate and speed to payment is very close to our heart. So I'm excited to learn today, and to kick us off, Matt, tell us a little bit about how did you get into this AR space in general, and then how did you get into the legal AR space in particular?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Emery, and thanks for the chance to be on the show. It's always good chatting with you, and nice to do so live, and hopefully get some value out to the listeners as well. Yeah, it's been a long journey, and so let's put it out there very clearly. Accounts receivable is not what I thought I would be doing with my life. To be very clear, I don't know that anyone thinks that way, but that means I have a whole lot in common with attorneys running their practices, because when they went to law school, they were not thinking that they would end up as bill collectors. Don't let the bald head fool you. I'm a teddy bear. I'm a nice guy, not too aggressive. No, but yeah, it's really interesting. So my co-founder and I, his name's Cameron Desatel, we've been friends for 20 years, worked at multiple startups together. Going on 10 years ago now, at the end kind of next year will be 10 years for us. So it's been a while. We got into this really thinking about how to help kind of small businesses of all shapes and sizes, or all types, get paid for their really difficult accounts. And so, the quick history for us is, we started as almost a marketplace for finding a collection agency, if you can imagine that. But most people don't know how to find a good one. That seems like a really difficult task. Are there good ones? Are there ethical collection agencies? But that was what I like to call Collbox 1.0. And
I want to dive into that. I won't interrupt you now, but I do have a question on that, because
there's so much to talk about.
Yes, keep going.
Totally. Yeah. And so, the reality though is we did that by way of integrating with accounting and billing systems, right? Like QuickBooks and others. And what we got to see though was a really pretty complete picture of the finances, or particularly the aging of, just thousands and thousands of small businesses of all types. And what we realized, a few years into that, we were certainly helping them with the really late stage invoices, your 90 plus, 120 beyond, years past due. But we had no solution in place for, how do I prevent this, right? What happens on the earlier part of that AR aging report, the 0 to 30? 30 to 60, what should a business be doing? And, we interviewed just tons of these businesses and found out that, quite frankly, and this is not just in legal, though it's also true there, the status quo is, hey, I invoice for my work and hope for the best, right? Like truly, like in aggregate, that's what's going on. And so we launched, I would say going on 4 or 5 years ago now, this sort of our current business model, this AR done for you, as I like to call it, where we come in, certainly do email reminders and have cadences, but then pick up the phone as well and hire humans trained in AR, right? Because that's a very specific skill set. Like I said, like not something anybody wakes up one day and goes, you know what I love? Like, let's do this. Let's chase bill. And so, but there are AR clerks. That's a profession, been around forever, right? So we got the bright idea, I think, to hire those people who are trained for it, don't mind making those calls, have that resiliency, and then use technology to fractionalize them, right? So the basic model, as you know, is one of our reps can handle 20 to 30 law firms worth of follow-up calls and chasing and things like that because of the integrations with things like Clio and Smokeball and others. And so, I would say we were still very agnostic for the first 3 years of that journey. And then it's about 2.5 years ago, we just kept running into law firms needing our help. Look, law firms, what I love about working with attorneys in particular is they know that their time is valuable, right? A lot of businesses, if you ask someone that, like they believe it, right? When you say, yeah, my time's valuable, but attorneys have an hourly rate attached to their name, right? And that is just a little bit easier to draw the line. And so in any case, we just kept getting requests from our accounting partners, some of which,
Mhm.
hey, you got to bring this thing to attorneys, but to do so, you're going to have to integrate with the practice management system. And
Mhm.
so last year, I guess it was early last year, we integrated with Clio, which was our first big legal one,
Mhm.
and we tripled our revenue. And that was around June when we integrated. It wasn't like in January. So the
Yeah.
back half of last year, we tripled our revenue. Clio named us one of the best new apps of their ecosystem. And we were just like, all right, we're never looking back. And since then, it's just been up and to the right, as we say. And that's true for us and for the cash flow of these law firms we work with. So it's and to that end, I guess to wrap up on that is, you know, I fell into the same trap tons of business owners do, which is I just couldn't see my way to narrowing down and niching down and saying no. And
Mhm.
turns out, we started going a heck of a lot faster once we did. So that's a whole podcast worth of,
Yeah.
of conversation on just like narrowing your focus and weirdly you'll go faster in a smaller market,
Yeah.
right? But yeah,
Yeah. Um, and for those who haven't seen the video, Matt leaf blowered $1 bills
yeah.
to the audience at the Clio conference. So you should go back to the website
On
and
our
check that out.
Instagram, it's on everything. We like to have some fun, we like to give back, right? And
Yeah.
so my little shtick is like Callbox gets you paid. I like to show people like, it's like a live demo really of what it feels
Yeah.
like to use Callbox.
So,
That's
wow.
my idea because marketing is hard and I'd rather just have fun. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I want to go back and touch on the kind of the marketplace for
yeah.
collections agencies. So, I know you're not doing that, or at least as much as you used to, but um, we do oftentimes get questions from law firms. Hey, should I hire a collection agency, or which collection agency should I hire? Not the main topic for today, but I'm just curious, given your experience in that space, what tips would you have for the law firm that's going out and maybe kind of considering looking for a collection agency?
Yeah, this comes up all the time. Basically, every consult that I have starts with, and the reason is no one goes shopping for any kind of accounts receivable solution, right, or collection solution when something's not bothering them, right? Like something's not on fire, or
Mhm.
quite frankly, something hasn't made them angry or frustrated them, right?
Yep.
And so yeah, it comes up all the time, and I have sort of I think the benefit of spending the first half of our journey here at Callbox, and we still like you mentioned, we still have involvement there. I still advise all the time on this. So but I like to say we started in the deep end, right? We're like in the middle of the ocean. We've been swimming to shore ever since in terms of like easier and easier and softer and more friendly follow up and things. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of get your feet wet in collections because it is tricky. And so we found, even before we narrowed down to law, people would use us because we made this like 3 clicks to send someone to collections, right? Our little tagline was from QuickBooks to collections in 3 clicks, right? We'll match you with a great agency. People would send stuff that they had no business sending to collections because it was so easy. I actually kind of
Yeah.
made the easy button for collections, and then things would blow up. Like my customers are so mad at me. What the heck, Callbox? I'm like, you sent them to collections. I mean, that's like and so
Yeah.
let's start there, right? I think the important thing for me in what I've seen is let's make sure we've done everything we can, chasing them friendly, all the internal processes. Obviously, that's what Callbox does, but make sure we've exhausted every effort possible, even possibly a settlement, discounts, payment plans. I mean, all these things. We can talk more about those as we go, but do make sure you're ready to burn that bridge. And a good collection agency is not going to be what you kind of see in the movies and stuff like that. I mean, those exist too, so be careful. Like there's a vetting thing that's important, but really good ones aren't like that. They're above board. They're not criminal or something, right? But the tone shift is enough to just kill that relationship anyways,
Mhm.
and just the emotion of sending someone to collect. I've been sent to collections.
Yeah.
So I think that's one, very, very important. Two, exhaust all your efforts. Two, something that, getting into law firms specifically, right? This will vary by jurisdiction, your bar, and then we'll talk about insurance too, like malpractice insurance or E&O insurance, right? Um, Sometimes your carrier will ask you, when you come up for renewal, how many clients have you sent to collections in the past year? It's usually how many clients have you filed suit against. So, not as common to get that collections question, but I've seen
Mhm.
it too. And so that's something that,
Mhm.
attorneys need to make sure, hey, is
Mhm.
this going to impact my premiums or my coverage? It probably won't, but I've seen some. So I think
Mhm.
we'll learn over time what the defining factor there is. Filing suit is the big one, as we all know, I think.
Mhm.
Um, but so be careful of that. And then, in case anyone who's just never done it before, because I work with plenty of firms who've never worked with agencies, they typically work on a contingency model, right? So they get paid a
Mhm.
percentage, usually pretty hefty percentage, of dollars actually recovered. So
Yeah.
that's great. It's success based. The risk is low, minus the sort of relational risks, right? We talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But the
Mhm.
the dollars, you're not throwing good money after bad in this example, right? But then what'll be important is you find an agency that is licensed um, in the state that the debtor is located in. Okay, so it's not
Mhm.
about where you are as a business; it's where the debtor is located, particularly for consumer debts. That's going to be the big one, and that's where
Mhm.
there's way more regulation, like the FDCPA. And we can talk more about that too if people get excited. But so that's important. Find someone licensed and vetted. The big national agencies are in all 50 states. No worries there. um,
Mhm.
and then those rates will vary based on the type of debt. Is it consumer or commercial? And then the age is the big defining factor. So
Mhm.
commercial B2B debt starts usually around 20-25% if it's less than a year past due. So that's
Mhm.
usually a really important marker, is like, let's not let this get too long in the tooth,
Mhm.
anyways, for your own sanity, but then also because there's a cost associated. On the consumer side, that's likely going to be 30 to 40%. It varies, but
Mhm.
30-35 is what I've seen most in my travels. Everything, that you see out there, I've seen much lower, I've seen much higher. It's about, is the agency successful or not? Because 20% of $0 is, I'm saving nothing. So spring for the better agency for the extra 5 or 10 points, right?
Mhm.
Um, but then consider that against your profit margins, your time, all these things. So hopefully that's helpful. As far as finding a good one, if you only do business in one state or like a cluster of states, you're very regional. Regional ones can be really good. They know the area. There
Mhm.
are, just like we've niched down to legal, as as you guys serve law firms as well. There are collection agencies that get industry specific as well. I think for
Mhm.
attorneys, when we're talking like a family law or like where individuals, a typical collection agency is probably fine. But if you're in a particular practice area where you serve a very specific type of clientele, or if you're B2B and you have only this type of manufacturing clients or construction clients or things like that, I've run into plenty of agencies that focus on construction and manufacturing, and so it's always nice to vet them in that way too, to see, so they know how the money moves inside the business that they're trying to collect from. I think there's all
Yeah.
kinds of ways to find good ones. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny, but it's a huge industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, been around forever,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
um, as old as Shakespeare, at least, right? When we talk about merchant of Venice. No, but so it's there's a lot there, and it can be hard to find good ones. But
Mhm.
like anything, we've got reviews. Look at those that have been in business for a long time.
Mhm.
There are fly-by-night operations too, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
mess with anyone who hasn't been in business, many years.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll drop it in the a link here in the comments on LinkedIn, but we have a database of collection agencies that at the very least advertise to to law firms, and I know obviously each state has different ethics rules on the client relationship, and just because you're hiring a collection agency doesn't mean you get to kind of wash your hands of that. So making sure that the collection agency understands the relevant ethics rules and how to deal with the client, similar to what you said, Matt, is super important, so that that doesn't come full circle and come back to
Right.
bite you.
You've already been hurt by not getting paid, and now you're in hot water, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
or those
Yeah.
your premiums go up because you didn't know that, and so
Hmm.
absolutely, do the research once, right? Get it right, and obviously barring any changes to like ethics rules and things. But then mark down your workflow, which I think we'll probably talk about today. Is defining that AR workflow is so important. And this is just one piece of it, and hopefully everything before that in the workflow, offering great and easy ways to get paid, having friendly follow up and cadences, things like that will
Hmm.
prevent it. I've seen it,
Yeah.
and in fact. We still have that service. We kind of rebranded it as Collbox Collect,
Hmm.
to sort of differentiate it from what we do now. But it still comes up, right? Law
Yeah.
firms and all kinds of businesses have asked me, how do I find a good, agency?
Hmm.
Hopefully, that's no more than 1 to 5%, five on the high side of your bad debt write off kind of situations. We could certainly chat industry stats though around collection rates, right? A la like
Hmm.
the Clio Legal Trends Report and things like that.
Hmm.
Some good benchmarking out there to know what's normal and what's way too much, right, in terms of how much
Yeah.
we're sending to collections.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for letting me take that little detour. Because it is a hot topic among firms that we talk to. So,
Absolutely.
well, let's move in a little bit more to the happier stuff upstream of collections.
That's right. Swim to
Uh,
shore. Yeah.
yeah. um, I think the term kind of cash flow is thrown around a lot, and I think intellectually a lot of folks know that lots of businesses fail because they run out of cash, and in some cases they might actually be profitable but still run out of cash.
Right. Right.
um, but yet the term, I feel like the term cash flow is thrown around a lot. It doesn't have a lot of bite to it. um,
Agree.
Despite the importance. So maybe you could just kind of level set us and talk a little bit about like what is cash flow and why does it matter?
Yeah. It's really the if blood keeps you alive in your body, cash flow is the blood to your business, right? And keeping it moving is obviously important too. There's different kind of issues and choke points we can have individually. Same thing, in our businesses, right? And so one thing I like to think about, I think a lot about the Clio legal trends report because it's just such a large data set, and it's really good stats. When we talk about, I'm going to quote some 2023 stats. They just released the 2024 one, and it's similar. So but I've somehow burned these into my brain. But I do highly recommend
We
people download.
unfortunately have not turned around between 2023 and
It
2024.
hasn't gotten shockingly better, and that exactly. And so, there's something about, and I think 2023 is important for me because they released a term called lockup, right? And I know you know what that is, but for those that may not be familiar, and it doesn't matter if you use Clio or not, it's really the measurement of how long it takes you to get paid for your work. So the time dimension. So I'll preface this by saying the collections rate is what everyone throws around, and profitability, obviously, too, like you said, Emery. It's like these are great stats and very important, but at any given year, I think in 2023's report, it was 89% was the kind of the median collection rate. And we're talking annual, like of dollars billed, how many got paid, right?
Mhm.
Annualized. And so 89%, I believe this year's stat is like 91, maybe 92. So it
Okay,
floats
so it's
around
coming
90.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming up. It is coming up. And that's an important, jump, but
Mhm.
it hovers around 90, right? I think and when you look at, multiple years in the past on that same report, I think it just floats up and down right around there. So that tells us, okay, let's just round to 90. you know 9 out of 10 times we're getting paid, right? Sort of for every dollar, right? Or 90 cents on the dollar. Depending on your profit margins, that might not be good enough, right? Like if you're running
Totally.
really thin and you're not pricing well enough, you got too low of rates because you're trying to be competitive. That may be enough to be sort of a problem for you, and that's the median, right? So that's not to say everybody. Um, but what I loved about last year's report is they released lockup, right? And so they really broke it into two parts that I think is really important. One is even further upstream than what we kind of deal with at Callbox, and one is centered dead on of what we do. And the first one is realization lockup, right? So how long does it take from tracking your time to getting the bill out the door, right? No call, we built what I think is a very great solution, but if you don't bill for it, we can't chase it for you, right?
Mhm.
And if they, similar, if you don't bill for it, Confido can't transact a payment for you, right? There's no, you haven't asked, right? And until you
Yeah.
ask for the money, no one's giving you any money. So it's critical, right? And so getting the bill out the door. I know firms struggle with the billing processes. Practice management systems have made this so much easier. Really the time tracking is the killer, right? It's not
Mhm.
the clicking send so much, right? It's the tracking of the time and approval
Mhm.
processes. So that's getting better and better every single year. But yet still, last year's realization lockup, I believe the median was 38 days, right? For
That's so
more than
crazy.
the median, right? Again, just remember, it's like so it gets worse. It does get better. In the same report, I don't know the stats off the top of my head. They do publish like the top and bottom 25 percentile, or quarter
Mhm.
as well. So you can kind of see where you stand. And if you're lower than that, it's just a wake up call. It's like don't beat yourself up about it. Just get moving on it. But 38
Mhm.
days. And so that's one piece, realization lockup that is upstream even further from us. But then there's collections lockup, right? Which is
Mhm.
something I was when they announced it, I've just gush a little. I was like, oh my god, finally someone's like put a name on it, right? Like this is so important thing that I've been living and breathing for a decade, but there weren't great terms, from accounting. You call that DSO, right? Or sometimes there's other metrics for that, but that's not what the average small to mid-sized business owner knows.
Yeah.
Collections lockup is really helpful for law firms, and it was published by Clio. It comes from accounting standards, right? But it is then, as you can guess, how long from billing does it take to get paid, right? And
Mhm.
that median, I believe, if I'm not to misquote, is right around 45 days. And
Mhm.
so even longer than it took to get the bill out the door. And then
Mhm.
when they did, I think they used a slightly different formula. They measured total lockup, right? The combination of that. And when they did the median for that, it was 97 days, I believe.
Yeah, I
Whoa,
saw that.
like
Crazy.
it's like, oh man, but I see that and I'm like, not shocking to me, but hopefully shocking to some. So the work you're doing right this moment as you listen to this podcast, right? You shouldn't expect to get paid for a quarter from now until from now. Unacceptable, right? We've
Yeah.
normalized a lot of bad behavior, right, inside of law firms, unfortunately, and setting good expectations for clients. But
Mhm.
there's all kinds of pieces as we know and we'll talk about. But yeah, those stats are really important to me. And to get back to your question, to level set there, I think it's important to know kind of where people are at. But when we talk about cash flow, if you're not expecting like whether you really think that way or not, but
Mhm.
statistically you're not able to get paid for a quarter, right, from when you do the work. Well, it's not like your bills or your expenses evaporate and get to shift to a quarterly cycle,
Yep.
right? Your rent, your electricity, and the number one thing is payroll, right? Whether
Mhm.
you're solo trying to pay yourself a livable wage, which I've lived through, right, and still at times feel like, ooh, is I might be able to make more money doing something else. But it's a different thing what brought us into running our own businesses, and that's for the firm owners too. um, but yeah, your employees would riot, right? If you're like, bad news guys, we got to move this out to a quarter from now, you'd fall apart. And
Yeah.
so that's when I think is maybe the most valuable way to think about cash flow, right? You have to keep the money moving through your business so that you can meet your obligations, right? And once we've achieved that, that's kind of table stakes, then we can start to achieve our goals, right? Which is the quality of life I want to have, or the number of staff I want to have, the size of firm I want to have, whatever the goal is. And I always try to be careful too and not have anyone mistake what I'm saying is, oh, you just, I want to make maximum dollars. Whether you want to give away as much legal work as possible and help those, with access to justice, those are all wonderful things to do. You have to do it from a place of sustainability, right? And so whatever your goal that wakes you up, and if it's money, that's all right too. Like you're a business owner, so don't feel bad on that either. But I think that people get kind of tricked almost or trapped into pro bono when they really didn't set out to do a pro bono case, right? Because they
Yeah.
just let it
You wanna
ride.
make a decision.
Yeah, do it with a great intention, and that is a wonderful place to be. But don't
Yeah.
don't give yourself that room to back up into it and say, "Oh, just yeah, it's fine. I'll do it as a pro bono." It's like we didn't mean to, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's crazy. If I'm doing the math right, so, like $1 million firm, going back to your 100-day lockup,
Yeah,
like $1 million firm basically has a quarter at any given time on average, an average firm has $250,000 of potential cash
it's
that's
getting
sort
there.
of locked up in the future somewhere. So,
Yeah,
I mean, think about what,
what does
and
it mean?
yes, it's probably not realistic to bill every day and get paid that day, but
Right.
there's a lot you could do with $250,000 more in the bank
I
without
think that
doing any more legal work.
anything, right? Yeah, the easiest cash, on the planet is getting paid for the work you've already done, right? And so there's this sort of, because we don't look at it, even as a business owner in the accounting and finance world, the AR world, we're subscription based. So hey, that is easier for me. I just things pop up when the credit card fails, right? It is a different business model than the average
Mhm.
law firm, and so I have the luxury of not worrying about that. But that's why the big flat fee conversation, obviously the implications of AI and just all of those things, the death of the billable hour as is being thrown around, but has been thrown around for a
I
really
want to
long
hit
time
that,
too.
yeah, with
Yeah,
you
we'll get there.
at the end.
And let's say the improvement on the consequences of the billable hour is how I think about it.
Mhm.
We could talk, we could zoom in more on that soon, but yeah, just you nailed it. $250,000 just setting in the wind. What does that mean for your firm, or a quarter of your annual revenue, right? Think of it that
Mhm.
way. Whoever's listening to this, whatever your number is, how
Mhm.
much is that, and what does that represent to your firm? And that goes back to, what are your goals, right? Why are you doing this, right? Because so far as I can tell you, in almost a decade in, running a business is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like, the romance of it is interesting. I have authority issues. I guess I was destined for this. I'm a really bad employee. I think that's true of a ton of attorneys I work with and other entrepreneurs I partner with. But dude, it's the hardest thing. This kills you. It's so stressful, and you have to make so many sacrifices to do this. And there are obviously plenty of pros too. I'm not about to say, because I wouldn't go back either, right? So there's reasons for that. But if you're doing one of the hardest things, I think there is, right, in terms of like what you're doing day in and day out, you need to make sure it's serving you, right? This is the businesses that we build should serve us, not the other way around. We shouldn't be chained to them, right? Like some
Yeah.
servant to the business. Like, you created it. Like, so there's all kinds of other lines that we could talk about there, but I think go back to why, right? That famous kind of quote, like, start with, go back to why, um, and then just make sure that we're setting up our business to achieve those things. But yeah, if it's a quarter
Yep.
million dollars, is that a new partner, a whole new practice area, a whole new geo, or just more admin so you can breathe a little bit and spend time with your kids, right? I think
Yeah.
about that stuff. Emery, you and I have small children, right? So
Yep.
I have,
Hopefully they're
two.
not here right now, but no promises.
That's right, right. Yeah, exactly. I'm at the office, but otherwise it would be the same. I have a two, almost 3 year old, and I have a 9 month old, and it's like my priorities are starting to shift, right? It was easier
Mhm.
to just say, like, throw my full self into this when I was younger, but now I need to make sure that it's sustainable too, right? I have the same issues, right? As anyone I'm preaching at, I'm kind of like talking to myself at the same time. But that's why I love working with attorneys, that run the firms, because we're just business owners at the end of the day, right? We're all struggling with almost all the same problems. So
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, I think that's a good kind of level set on cash flow, and we can think about that. 100-day lockup, $250,000, whatever. But it's real money that can be spent. Um, so let's transition into kind of like what to do. If you're that average
yeah,
firm with the 100-day lockup, or maybe you're below average. What have you seen work? Um, Both kind of like before someone like Collbox would get involved,
yeah,
and then also like what are the things like you y'all are doing this every day. Like, what do you do to really nail it and
yeah.
get those invoices paid like with a smile on your face as
That's
opposed
right.
to the baseball bat.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, and I'll point out too, just in case anyone feels like, I don't want anyone to feel like this is just a big pitch for Callbox. We're doing what you can do within your own business, right? It's classic sort of, hey, that kind of stinks, and maybe you don't like doing that. We'll do it for you. That's fine. But and we understand law firms particularly well. But everything we do is really built on best practices from the accounts receivable world. So there's no dark magic here. There's some automation and some cool technology, right? But you can fundamentally do everything we do without
Mhm.
engaging like a company like us. So yeah, there's so many things, right? I think, I'm a lifelong, my career before running a business was mostly in sales and biz dev, right? So I love talking, as you already knew before this podcast, but now everyone else is learning. But setting good expectations in the sales process, or what we call the intake process, right? Sometimes people don't pay, quite frankly, because they didn't understand what value they were really going to get from it. And I fully appreciate that we don't know, as attorneys, right? You don't know the way the wind's going to blow on certain cases, depending on your practice area, depending on, your area. Sometimes you just can't predict it, right? Of course. But I think setting expectations around cost is very important. Sticker shock is super real, right? It's one of the big reasons people don't pay. Um, and that gets into your billing processes, right? So, you know, I there are tons of, I don't want to call them influencers, but thought leaders that just kind of, espouse weekly, billing, biweekly billing. I, my advice on this, just from living in the trenches with invoices all the time, is like, you need to get if monthly is your thing right now, get monthly right. Get it clean. Get it every single month on the same day. No exceptions, no excuses. We need to like tame that beast, right? Get it done right there. Start there. Now I am a big fan of biweekly billing. So I think shifting to more frequent, um, you know, take everything I say with a grain of salt for your practice area, but do challenge yourself on this a little bit too, because sticker shock is so real. I see it all the time. And so, particularly if you're in like a litigation heavy, firm, anywhere where you're doing court appearances, where those hours just stack up real fast and kind of overnight, if you're feeling like the crunch, and billing a lot of extra hours in a particular period, just remember that's going to cause a shock to your client, right? Because one month it's this little balance and the next month it's, 10x or something. That's hard, right? Especially if you're dealing with consumers. So billing
A lot of
processes,
times,
yeah,
payroll. Most businesses do payroll every 2 weeks, and if that's your main expense, which it's going to be for a law firm,
that's right.
align billing with payroll.
That's a
That's
great way to
fine to that.
conceptualize it, right? Yeah, bring in cash at the cadence you expect to be spending most of your largest expenses. Absolutely. So, I think setting good cost expectations, I'm jumping around a little bit, is super important during the intake process. If you walked into a Best Buy, trying to buy a TV and someone said it might be 500, it might be 50,000, I hope you would leave that Best Buy, right? Like it's unacceptable as a consumer. And I know it's easy for me to say that, but start thinking like whoever's trying to, going to need to pay you, right? And align your processes and expectations with them. It's just going to serve you. I know the costs can wiggle, but you have the data. If you're tracking your time and you're using a practice management system, you can go look at, historicals on all kinds of cases, not just average everything. You can segment them too, right? This one was a particularly nasty divorce, right? If you're in family law, or no, this one was a really difficult case. Well, let's segment those, because it's all about sort of statistics at this point, and then we start to normalize that. Okay, for this kind of case, easy, medium, hard, something like that. These are the rough ranges you can expect, right? And it's about being good at sales in that way, and quoting and things. Then the billing process is critical. And then where we get sort of in, more often is the follow up, right? If you're going to track your time and you're going to bill for it, and your practice lends itself to like an hourly billing model, then you need to be following up on those invoices, right? That status quo I told you about earlier is like, people just send it and hope for the best. The thing is, most people aren't bad people, right? They pay on time or roughly on time, right? That should be the vast majority of your clientele, but an important percentage will get sort of locked up, as we talked about, right? And that's where they need the nudge. There's different buckets of debtors, if you want to use sort of the industry term. I don't like using that term so much because they're clients, right? And debtor feels a little more like once they've gotten further down the pike, on not going well. But most people are not malicious or willful, debtors or delinquent accounts, right? They're probably forgot. There's clerical reasons like, hey, I didn't get the invoice. I ignored the email. I wasn't paying attention. That's why resending and reminders will do that for you. Your practice management solution has that. But by day 10, day 15 past due, that's where we like to get in. So I say, pick up the phone, friendly. Think of it as a client service thing. Hey, how's everything going? Did you get that? Do you have any questions? Do you know anything going on I can help you with? Don't If you think you're being a bill collector, you or your staff are going to get kind of turned off to the process. Nobody wants to ask for money. Think about it as a client service check-in, right? And then it's just touch points, because you're inviting your client to tell you why they didn't pay. You're going to learn something. Maybe you'll learn that they're not going to pay you and they're not a nice person. Well, okay. Sometimes, hopefully, that's a very small percentage if we've done everything else right, and it will still happen too. But it's probably something else. Oh, I didn't get it. I'm in financial hardship right now, business or consumer. That's anybody, right? We all go through it. No one wants to freely admit that, usually, because it's embarrassing. And so if you kind of present them, this is where payment plans and other stuff we could talk about, come up. But you have to invite them to give you the answer. Almost no one volunteers the reason why they're not paying. But it might be a client services issue. No, I just don't feel like it went well, or I don't understand what's happening, and I don't feel comfortable giving you lots of money because I don't understand what's happening. But I think of it as like, treat it as like your listening device, right? I'm inviting you to tell me what's going on, while of course reinforcing that I expect to be paid for my work, but in a very friendly way, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting, and maybe I'll get this wrong, but you had some fun tricks in there too. Like I feel like maybe there was buying someone cookies involved or
Oh,
something.
yeah, good call. So depending on who you're collecting from, right? No, this is goes back to setting expectations on pricing and things. It's like you got to get inside their head, right? Who are they? And if it's an individual, well, that can be very different. Is it a high net worth individual? Is it a lower income individual? Like, what's going to happen there? You need to be aware of, and it's all intentionality of like who you're serving, right? And you got to know what's going to happen and plan for it. But yeah, if you're where you're coming in is, if you do B2B, right, businesses are your clients, particularly mid-sized to larger businesses that have an accounts payable department. No one, much like the unsung hero of AR, AP is a pretty unsung hero too. Um, I'm biased. I think it's an easier job. It's really the act of giving your money to someone else, but that's okay. Let's call out for a moment too. We all pay our bills on time and feel morally obligated to, right? If we can, right? And we do everything we can to do that. Yet I want to point out that all of us, all these business owners, these firm owners I work with, feel so bad about asking for getting paid for what their work, right? So
Yeah. Mhm.
sit with that, everyone, for a little bit and consider why that is. But talking about the AP person, literally, if it's a mid-sized company where your invoice is more prone to get lost in the shuffle, there's just tons of volume going through there. Send that person, a box of cookies and a thank you, even if they haven't been very helpful to you. Just lie. I'm sorry, but just, hey, thank you for always taking care of us. You've always been an awesome, person to work with. We love working with your company because you always take care of us. We just really appreciate it. Just wanted to say thanks. Your invoices, right to the top of that pile, because no one shows that person love. That is definitely an unsung hero type role.
Mhm.
There's little ways to do stuff. And if it's $20 for cookies or something, but your bill is 20,000, 200,000, whatever it might be, spend the $20, right? And that they'll love you forever, and they'll process yours first. Because something I do a lot of consulting on, and when I do educational like classes, the name of the game in accounts receivable is to be first in line to be paid. Like, there are all kinds of competing priorities. They're different for whoever your customer is. You just want to be near the top, right? So that when they're doling out their money, whether it's a business or an individual, they feel, oh, this is high priority, and I'm happy to pay it. And
Mhm.
so, first in line, first to get paid is what I like to say. And some cookies to an AP person will do wonders for you getting to the top of that pile. Um, and so, because, again, businesses are trying to save money, play some financing games. Big companies are notorious for doing this to small companies. That's mostly where I got my start, was like, really small businesses. Think like a roofer, or what's a better example? Contractors, like, like I had one actually. There's one. We used to be based in Dallas. We're in Austin, Texas now. There was a really awesome construction outfit that would come in and remodel hotel bars, right? Like, that was their thing.
Mhm.
They're really into. They do these super high end bars, and I won't name names or anything like that. But high end hotel wasn't paying them so badly for so long that, the owner told me, he's like, I think we're going to shut our doors. Like, I can't pay my guys, and we can't do
Yeah.
work.
Mhm.
And this was in the collections days, so we actually had an agency we partnered with that was construction specific. Like I told you,
Mhm.
everyone earlier, find someone who knows the way the money moves. Man, they turned that around somehow so quickly. Within like a week. Within a week, it was like 80 grand for this guy, right? For him, as like a solo owner with some contractors on his staff, he's like, you guys literally kept our doors open. Oh my God. It was like one of the coolest early wins we had as a business. And that's where it really started to sink into me, like, what we're doing really matters.
Yeah.
And it's not something anyone, every firm owner listening, and even operations team member as well, should know how the money flows and take responsibility for it, because the consequences will lay at your feet, unfortunately, right, as the owners. But know how it works, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. Right? You just have to know how to solve the problem, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, I mean, like my experience, the reason I got into the legal space was as a client of law firms and seeing, experiencing what it's like and the friction and the challenges of getting a legal bill in an age where both consumers, but also that AP person at the business is used to going home and, buying things on Amazon with one click. And, these are like really easy, frictionless processes. So it's a total shock to then be presented, with something that's challenging and, that comes with all this baggage. So,
I've definitely and I know it's ironic who I am and what I do, but I've drug out payments on things when it's like you have to mail a check. I'm like, do we even have a checkbook? Like it's 2024, almost 2025, and like we're a tech company. Like it's like know who your audience is, right? Like
yeah.
I think, and you may be similar to this, but consumers are like this also, right? We
Oh,
all
yeah.
inundated with the best technology on the planet, right? Apple or
Mhm.
Google or whatever you use, is just like throwing the most amazing, interesting, convenient stuff in the world. Stop for a second and remember that as individuals, like we're very spoiled in this age, right? Of like how easy things are. And that, but
Totally.
unfortunately, it's obviously cool, right? I love it. I'm a
Mhm.
total nerd about tech, but it does mean the standards have never been higher and they're not going to go down going forward,
Mhm.
right? It is
Yeah.
only going to get worse for us as businesses. And you have to meet your client where they are, whoever they are, right?
Yeah.
And, look, I know some attorneys listening to this have some old school clients, right? You're in the estate planning game or, high net worth individuals that may be a little bit older. They're just not as savvy with it. So that's fine. You got to meet them where they are too. Hopefully you can gradually, I mean, time will solve this over a long enough time horizon, but gently nudging and setting better expectations with new clients. Like that's another thing we could talk about too is
Mhm.
look, it's really hard to like rewrite history or unearth like people who've already got a set expectation and a feeling about you as you're in your practice and the work that's been done. But you can set the very next consult. You can set better expectations. Hey, we do payments this way. Blah blah blah. Try it out too. That's a lot of things people I think are afraid to do. Is like it's almost like A/B testing. Like, or we're going to keep half clients the same way, and or 25% of the new ones are going to get down this other path and just
Mhm.
test it out. I know that can be a little burdensome from the staff's perspective, but if you make small experiments happen and then you
Mhm.
just see how you feel, that could be interesting. It's like pricing strategy too. We publish our prices on our site. I believe transparency is really important. So it's a little harder for me, but like, I've poked around a little bit. Like, why don't we just try? Are we charging enough? I don't know.
Mhm.
I know that's a struggle for everybody, myself included, right? I feel like we're way underpricing what we do, but
Mhm.
we're also really relatively new to the legal world. And that, to me, I
Yeah.
think it's more interesting to get feedback and grow and have more firms,
Mhm.
getting value. And then we'll figure it out later. But
Yeah.
right or wrong, that's my mentality on it anyway.
Yeah. I would say this is a total aside, but one of the things that's so frustrating is when a business doesn't value itself enough to charge enough to do a good job. You know,
Right. You
like,
have to make sure you can afford to do a good job, right? And
yeah.
that
Yeah.
thankfully that hasn't been an issue for us. But yeah, I see it with attorneys all the time. Like I just like they can barely make ends meet and then, or
Mhm.
they're just not. I've seen this in every vertical I've ever in my whole career, my whole life, really, my professional life. I think I used to see it more with creatives, like, like digital designers or website builders, like anyone with a creative heart and mind. I always felt like, oh, they're just so nice, they're just really into art and they're more into the craft. And I thought, oh, maybe that's just a unique demographic that just feels bad and it feels like they're always overcharging, even though they're
Mhm.
not, right?
Yeah.
Turns out I was way wrong. That's just human behavior. Like,
Yeah.
'cause I'm sort of a nerdy creative guy who weirdly runs an AR company for law firms, but I like painting. No, I don't know. But I thought I would be a video game designer, which is totally weird. And I have a degree in that, but here we are in accounting and finance for law firms.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
it's
Not know
a
that.
journey. Life's a journey, no, but so I nerd out on stuff, and that's why I resonate a lot with those types of people too.
Mhm.
But no, attorneys, oh my God, solo or even small to mid-size firm owners running family law, immigration,
Mhm.
really any practice area, but certainly when you're dealing with individuals, I
Mhm.
see such big hearts, the biggest hearts in the world.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the expression of that is I have to cut my prices to help people, but that's
Mhm.
not sustainable, right? You're going to burn out long before retirement age, let's say. Um,
Mhm.
It's you got to live from a place of sustainability, right? To do more good, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And there's a lot you can do by focusing on, accessibility as opposed to affordability.
Absolutely.
So,
That's a great point.
um, and we could probably talk about that
Yeah.
for a long time. But in the last couple minutes here, I want to go back to the kind of the death of the billable hour piece, because we have promoted this. A great way to get paid, obviously, or a great way to make sure you get paid is to get paid before you start
Of course.
work. And so I'd love to hear kind of your comments on where do you see kind of like the billable hour going? As someone who's like in the trenches working with firms that are using this billing model, like what does the future look like with this movement of kind of death of the billable hour?
Yeah, there were some really great conversations about this, content like presentations at CleoCon, which was about a little over a month ago in Austin, Texas, which was cool. So we felt pretty excited about
Yep,
that.
at
Um,
home.
love that. And then, obviously, and for many, many years before, and there'll be many more years of conversation post, but what I was hearing, look, AI, the advent of AI, right? In the last couple of years, we've just all been blown away by it. I mean, from every walk of life, right? But never mind, just Chat GPT alone, never mind everything else that's come off of that. Look, administrative tasks can and will be automated, right? They will go faster. They will be, and that doesn't mean abandon all proofreading, things like that, obviously, especially right now, but ever, is my opinion on that. But for certain pieces of our workflows, God, it's going to be automated, to 80, 90% accuracy. In some cases, it's already exceeded that, right? Um, what was the number? I think Clio debuted there's like 73% of tasks, administrative tasks within a law firm can be automated now, right? With AI, which is like, oh shit. Okay. So, that's a lot. But there's a competing issue here, right? Like I think, and I want to point out too, yes, we pretty much only partner with firms that use billable hours, right? Because they have AR and they need the solution. I don't want to be someone who's stuck in the past just for my own incentives either, right? Like I want to skate to where the puck is going, right? Not just
Mhm,
always chasing it, saying, "Stop doing that." That's bad for me. Like I don't feel that way. It's our responsibility to innovate, right? That's
mhm,
and do something valuable in line with all of that future. But I do just from all of the interactions, and I'm sure you've had this experience as well. I think this change is still a long time coming. I do think the AI was the catalyzing factor that people just kind of can't ignore now. And then the uptake of that into the technology platforms that was already, so kind of the move to cloud wasn't enough, right, to kill the billable hour. The advent of
mhm,
AI probably is, right? But it will be the adoption of technology companies doing that in the standard workflows that the attorneys use. There's always leading and bleeding edge, folks who are adopting it and doing amazing things, but that's just not how normal distribution works, right? It's like there's a huge amount of people that are going to take a while to get there, but it will be the tools they use adopting it that they will naturally just have less to do, right? And so that's where the conversation I thought was interesting was around this disincentive almost. If you just put it on paper, it goes two ways, obviously. But like, well, if it's going to automate all my tasks, then I can't bill as much as I used to ethically. I can't do that, right?
yeah,
So I don't want to use AI. Like it could be one camp of people. Those are your laggards and the
yep,
kind of lower 50, right? So you got to be careful of those people because they're attached, right?
mhm,
I think there will be. We can only move as fast as our slowest members of the pack sometimes, right? So there's going to be a lot of that. So I think let's adjust our expectations on the time horizon. Um, so all that to say, I'm not terrified yet that like Collbox will be obviated anytime soon. But that doesn't mean it's not better for everyone if it is, right? And so
mhm,
look, the best AR, and you've heard it here first, no, is like is to not have any AR, right? If
yeah,
you don't need me and you're achieving all of your goals and things are good, then that's awesome. But that will limit your market. Like who can you serve, right? It's like
mhm,
and there's like amazing family law attorneys who will only do uncontested divorces and it's flat fee and they get it up front and they kick butt on that and
mhm,
it's awesome and that's fine, but you got to be willing to say no, right? And so that's okay so long as we have the strength to do that.
mhm,
But yeah, I think it's inevitable that it will rapidly diminish. It'll pick up speed every year, rapidly diminish that model. Like because there is that the disincentive from sticking with either doing AI or sticking with the hourly billing model. But the tech companies are going to keep adopting it because it's going to massively improve quality and outcomes for the users and profit margins for the tech companies. Like it's
Mhm.
just going to happen like that. And by the way, if the firms adopt it too and go with the flow on that, their profit margins as well. So other things to think about, and I know I'm sure you've talked a lot about this before, is like you have or should have a practice management tool or time tracking tool at minimum, right? You kind of have to by virtue of what you do. Then track your time. Don't change anything yet, right? Track your time, log it, but get into analyzing what would it be if I had done flat rate, for this case, and then this is where statistics come in, right? We just go look through all the historicals, whether we average it, we should normalize it a little, get the outliers out there, like the really bad, messy divorce. And I'll keep picking on that example, but for the average blank, what is my average? And then what are my profit margins on that? And do I like that? Is that in line? What I think a lot of firms will see happen is their overall revenue could go down a little bit, but their profit margins
Yeah.
could skyrocket if they
Mhm.
lean into this. And that's okay. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If you think about maybe I'm doing less work for more money, then isn't that really the dream, guys? To some
Yep.
extent. Or I can take on yet more work and make even more money if that's your goal too, right? So I
Yep.
think I challenge people to think about it that way, rather than just get scared. And like I said, look, it kind of isn't, and we're in the firing squad line, the line of fire of like as is today. Callbox in 10 years, I don't think exists, right? Like the way it does today. Doesn't
Yep.
mean we won't keep innovating and finding ways. I think there's all sorts of other things though. Once we get to flat fee, if that's the solution we want to get to, that term's sort of abused too, because flat fee is not the same thing as flat fee paid up front,
Yeah.
right? Um, like let's just recenter. I get that as an objection. So, well, I'm flat fee. I'm like, well, okay. Do you take all that up front? Well, no, we do
Yeah.
payment plans. You're like, well, then you're not. You have accounts receivable like by any other name. Or if the credit card fails, who's chasing? It's the same action, right? And
Yeah.
so I think we
Even
might.
getting paid up front, you still have to sometimes chase down, to get that going.
Yeah,
So
or more work, or yeah, good point. Yeah, getting it paid up front. So then this goes into technology. I think getting to flat fee is a statistics game. It's a data game. We can measure it. We can get there. We can make bets. We need to be measuring profit margin very heavily against that. Time on administrative tasks will certainly go down as AI usage goes up. But it already has with better technology before AI. Like it's not that different. Like don't get spooked, but it's just faster and is moving really fast. So that part's a little scary. Um, but then I think, what role is there, for us, for yourselves? You guys do a lot of this, right? Payment plans, right? Or okay, it's flat fee. Now we're talking clear cost structure. So that's great expectation setting. And then I think it's also, something we could look at. Well, how do we break that up but de-risk it, right?
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and if it's 50 grand or 100 grand flat fee, awesome. But if it's a middle class individual who has to pay it, that's not going to work, right out of the gate. So then we got to look at ways to
Mhm.
de-risk that for them, right? It's really important.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's exciting to chat about kind of the future of where that's going. We're about at time. So Matt, just really appreciate you taking the time to come today.
Oh, my
Um,
pleasure.
Callbox website for those who do want to outsource the kind of the follow up between sending that bill out and a collections agency.
That's
Is
right.
that the best? Is that the best place?
Yeah, absolutely. So Callbox, Collbox.co. That's us, not
Mhm.
.com. Sorry. No, but look, if you as an attorney, if you're listening to this, or you or your paralegal, your legal billable staff have no business doing this work, period. But even your administrative folks who may not, are likely aren't trained in it, right? It's not their favorite thing to do. We'll do all the friendly follow up, including the phone calls. That's our whole model is bringing those people in house at Callbox and taking care of that. But look, whether you're fighting as hard as you can to get to that flat fee paid up front, but you just have a bunch you need to collect and get the cash flow to make the strategic shift, we can help. Or if you're going to stick to your guns on the hourly for a little while, then you really need something like what we have, right? You need to have best practices. But we have good content too on the site around how you can do it yourself. So like I said, it's not just about Callbox, it's just about doing the work, right? You will get paid faster. Something I don't know if I told you is like one fun stat is like, look, the big thing we do is the phone calls. Like if I had to zero it in on one thing, and our
Hmm.
clients get paid an average of 40% faster than they were getting paid before us. So
Hmm.
that's all there is proof to me. But I wish I could take all the credit. But if you just pick up the phone, you'll get paid faster. It's funny. Yeah, it's not that complicated, but it's not that fun either. So
No,
yeah,
no, yeah. If you don't want that hanging over your head, have Matt do
that's
it.
right.
So,
Exactly. Nice guy.
awesome.
Appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We've got some exciting new episodes coming up. If you're interested in going the flat fee route, 2 episodes ago, we did a great flat fee episode with some folks who've actually recently implemented flat fees as well. So thank you all for joining today. Thanks, Matt, for coming, and we'll see you next time.